Hi everyone, just want to do a quick build update. So I did a day 1, day 2 POB previously, and then I did the day 4. So now I'm doing our day 6 plus POB. I've been running this build, haven't changed my gear for about a day or so. So I just wanted to give an update of where the gear is at, because it's changed a bit since the day 4 POB that I released, and which I'll put down in the description below. And I'll go through my gear pieces. But first, I think I just want to run a random map. So this is what? AoE, Fizzazz, AoE. Okay, a bit of a spooky map, but let's just run it anyway to give a showcase of how the build looks like. So I'm not going to cover this, but essentially I'm running a kind of a boss rush T17 strategy. So just killing the boss in the T17 map. That's all we need to do. And in my previous video, I talked about the haunted buff, so you can see that I'm possessed, and that is the haunted buff that I'm getting. If you want to learn more about it, it's in the previous video, but essentially it is just an enchant on my wand that's giving me this buff. And you'll see more in the POB later how I've approached the configuration of this ghost buff. So I think the worry about is the AoE explosions. The AoE is so big. Okay, oh, we drop a unique. So anyway, that is the showcase of the build in the T17 map with a lot of modifiers. So let's go over the build. And to do that, I think I want to jump into the path of building. Here you go. So this is the build, currently level 97. I've been doing a lot of difficult content, so I've been dying a bit. And I want to talk about the gear first, and then talk about the key themes behind how I went about designing the build. I went about briefly, but I want to talk about some aspects of the build and how I approach getting there. So first, let's talk about the weapons. Pretty much I just bought T1 fractured suffixes, and then I spammed Deafening Essence of Misery, and once you get 3 T1 suffixes, you can just metacraft with suffix cannot be changed using a Wild Bristle Matron that's 50 chaos, by the way, instead of 2 divines from the bench. And then suffix cannot be changed, and then you Veil Orb, and then you hit either percent lightning, spell damage mana regen, or spell damage non-chaos as chaos as the prefix, and you're good to go. Apart from that, that's pretty much the wands, and then I just slam Exalt for fun. And the enchants is going to be the next thing I'm going to talk about. So the first weapon I'm going to have Curse with Ally Weakness on hit, so that's the enchant from Night's March. And the second wand is the enchant with Tormented Spirits, which I talked about earlier, which is also enchanted through Night's March. Next is going to be the helmet, which is going to be a +1 power charge helmet. At the early stages of the build, where it's optimal, that's where you have percentage lightning or percentage cold leech as life, to be able to have some leech back to your HP pool. So that is now gone, and we have moved that to the gloves, which has lightning leech now. So with that, we are able to free up our power charges on the helmet, and this gives us a significant damage boost. You can see that 1 power charge gives us quite a bit of damage actually. Currently we're crit cap with the Bottled Faith, but if we are not, the power charge gives us not that much damage for some reason. Oh, because our power charges are set here. So yeah, it doesn't show in the config here unfortunately, but if we go from 4 to 5, essentially our damage goes from 51 million to 55 million, so that is about somewhere 7-8% increase in DPS per power charge, and with that on our helm, that gives us a little bit more damage. So next is going to be the chest. So initially I had a lightning coil with a 5 off color. If you're wondering how you get the off color, there's 2 main ways. The first way is just to bench using the Verici method. So that's going to be having 3 sockets on your lightning coil, and then you're crafting the 120 chromes on the bench, giving you 3 blue guaranteed on the first 3 sockets. And then you do 4 socket, 3 socket, 4 socket, 3 socket. Then once you get a blue, you do 5 socket, 4 socket, 5 socket, 4 socket until you get a blue. And then the last one, you just need to 6 socket, 5 socket, 6 socket until you get a red. So essentially, I think I estimate it to be around 1,000 to 2,000 jewelers, which should be fairly cheap at this stage of the league. Maybe at most 1 to 2 divines extra to get the colors that you need. The second way is that if you already have a corrupted chest, this could be a corrupted 6-link or something that you buy on the market. For myself, I bought a corrupted 6-link with reduced crit for 11 divines 2 days ago. And then I used tainted chromes. So the expected number of tainted chromes that you'll need to use is 120. I hit it at 40, so I kind of high rolled it a little bit, but the chromes are not too expensive. When at the time of buying, it was about 30 chromes, 30 tainted chromes to 1 divine. So about 4 divines to chrome it via the tainted chrome method, if you want to buy a chest that already has reduced damage from crits. So this implicit is quite important because for T17 maps that I'm running, this will nullify half of the crit damage that I'm going to be taking from the crit rolls. And you can take it a step further if you want to go a bit more defensive to switch this mastery to reduce crit from enemies. But currently I'm just going for the damage because I'm going for speed and a bit less emphasis on the XPs. Next is my glove. So essentially you have to solve a dex roll somewhere, just because Lightning Coil has a dex requirement of 96, and that is reduced by the Azuri Foible's attribute requirements, so you need a bit less than 96, 25% less to be exact. And so there's about 73 or so dex that you need. So which means that you need to find dex on one of the suffixes somewhere on your gear. So it doesn't matter if it's a roll of 20 or a roll of 50, you just need at least 20 dex somewhere to be able to equip your gear. So I chose that to be on the glove, and I'll tell you a little bit more why later. So dex is a suffix, and of course chaos res is going to be very, very important for the build. Currently you can see that I'm chaos res cap at 75, so this is the first place that you see that I'm having chaos res. The boots has chaos res as well, and the ring has chaos res to kind of solve all the chaos res that I need for my build. So that's going to be, I think, 60 plus 75, 135 resist that I'll need to figure out, which I've gotten on these pieces of gear. Apart from that, in terms of the implicits, it's going to be Lightning Leech that I mentioned earlier, and Unnerve, which adds about a bunch more damage to the build. Enemies take more spell damage, and we have the Alva mod, which has increased damage against chilled enemies to add a little bit more damage, not mandatory by any means. Next is going to be the boots. You can either choose between Brittle Ground or Action Speed here. I think Action Speed, although it might be less POB DPS before you crit cap, but Action Speed will help you get more speed, more fluidity in your movement, and kind of kiting around the boss. And I felt like it was a lot better after I got Action Speed, comparing it to Brittle Ground before that. So nothing much, just life, mana, standard stuff on the glove and the boots, life, mana, resist. And the amulet is a bit of a no-brainer, so it's going to be Azuri's Foible. I think I got a 22% roll, and then I put a 20 catalyst on it, 20 fertile catalyst to get the mana and mana regen up. The ring is going to be life and triple resist. Triple resist because I chose to get the dex on the glove instead of the ring, because if I'm going to be putting prismatic catalyst to increase the chaos res rolls, I want it to benefit all the suffixes. If I have a dex roll, that's not going to benefit. So I felt like it was more optimal to have it on the ring instead. Next is Anathema. In our previous POB, we just had a standard Anathema. That's perfectly fine. Now I have an Anathema. I think I bought it for 4 divines. Cannot be poisoned. And that's because one of the rolls on the maps is all damage can poison from the enemies in T17s. So having a cannot be poisoned is very crucial. So I can kind of filter out that roll. That roll is now free for myself to run. And on top of that, chaos damage is the damage type that is most detrimental to the build. Not only because you cannot bring it above with melding, but also because chaos damage bypasses your energy shield, and that energy shield, which was previously protecting your life, that 2000 ES, is not protecting against chaos damage, which means you lose EHP, and that is the most dangerous damage mod that you can take. So getting maximum chaos res is so important, and on top of that, having cannot be poisoned will help to mitigate that poison damage. You could opt for some Pantheon options to reduce chaos damage taken over time, or reduce damage taken over time to reduce that damage. But definitely, if you're optimizing for the build, definitely Chaos Res Cap is going to be very optimal. Early on when I was mapping, this is where I took Asylum to kind of bump that up before you get the Chaos Res gear. Next is of course Mage Blood, no-brainer when you're optimizing an endgame build. This helps you organize your flask to solve problems of resistances, solve problems of maximum resistances, and speed. And a few quality of life effects such as ailment immunity to shock in my case, and curses. And coming to my flask, I talked about this in the earlier video, but essentially solving for maximum resist. I'll talk about this in more detail after this, but Topaz Flask to give the maximum lightning resist and lightning resist to cover the downsides of the lightning coil. Silver Flask for speed, you get permanent onslaught, you get attack speed, cast speed, and in this case I have the elemental resist suffix. Quicksilver for speed and immunity to curses, Abysmal Flask for resist and immunity to shock. Lastly, you have a few options here. Before you get bleed immunity through your mastery, if you don't want to take this, you can opt in for a life flask here, so that's a defensive option. One way to deal with bleeding and corrupted blood immunity. The second option is going to be the Bottle of Faith that I have over here. So this is the damage option where you can suddenly boost your damage from, you can see here, 55 million to 78 million damage. Actually, it's 60 million damage to 82 million damage with the power charges. And yeah, so this is a damage option that I pop on very tough enemies like Virizium unique bosses or the T17 boss essentially. I see those are the two places which I use that. So I use the increase effect because I'm not using it very often, so I just put on the enkindling here as well to kind of increase my damage output. In terms of the jewels, you'll see on the tree, a natural instinct, melding, light of meaning, a rare jewel, and a timeless jewel. So first and foremost is the combination between the unnatural instinct and the light of meaning. You don't really see it here on the tree, but essentially when you remove it, you lose the flat mana that you get from light of meaning. So let me show it in game where you can actually see that difference. So light of meaning, what does it do? It gives 5 mana for every passive that you allocate in the radius. So you can see over here, the cold resist has a +5 mana, this is a +5 mana, and so on. So everything in the radius has a +5 mana, which is huge for the build because every flat mana you get is just amplified by the percentage increased mana that you have. So that is a lot of mana. And Unnatural Instinct essentially allocates all unallocated small passives in the area. So like all these passives, they all get allocated. And the beauty of this build is that all these unallocated passives have the additional +5 mana as well. That makes this combination of Unnatural and Light of Meaning with mana one of the most interesting and I would say very strong and cost efficient in terms of passive points combination of jewels in the game. There have been previously some interactions with Timeless Jewels and using all 3 jewel sockets and Unnatural Instinct to combine this, but this takes it kind of a little bit further, and they introduced it only last league, so this is a very good addition to the build to be able to bump up your mana, giving you flat mana in the radius for all the unallocated passives. You can see that by hovering over the Unnatural Instinct on the 4th line, you'll see the +105 mana, which you otherwise wouldn't have without the Light of Meaning. So yeah, I think someone asked me, should I save up for a Mage Blood, which is like 200 div, or get these two, for like, I don't know, 20-30 divines. This is definitely a combination that will free up a lot of mana passives because you don't need to scale past 10,000 mana to be able to have a good and efficient build. So that is the first 2 jewels, of course, Melding of the Flesh to be able to get maximum resist capped. So you can see that I'm on 90% maximum resist. And over here is going to be a rare jewel that solves the maximum resist as well, plus the MAXRES and mana rolls and crit. Lastly is a Timeless Jewel, which helps, so I think the options here are going to be Doriani's. I think Steel Mage last league introduced that approach with the Glorious Vanity of the Doriani to kind of make use of your life ES pools a lot more efficiently, given that you're leeching life and ES and you're splitting the damage across both, allows you to mitigate more damage. But for myself this league, although that was the premier option for defense, I chose for the quality of life improvements for the mana cost, given the nerfs to inspiration. Your mana cost without this now is fairly high. So you can see my mana cost is 206, but with the jewel it brings it down to 156. And this is something that a lot of builds have to solve that you might forget, which I'll talk about in just a second. So that is my options. One thing good about this is the Inner Conviction. On top of that, the Timeless Jewel, apart from the mana cost reduction, and that every passive you allocate in the radius gives 4% damage. So you can either go for the area damage or elemental damage as the other roll on the Militant Faith. And the Inner Conviction also adds a ton of damage, which is 3% more damage per power charge. And in this build, we are stacking up to 6 power charges, which is 18% more spell damage. So that is the passive tree, and that is the jewels. So yeah, I won't go into too much about how I scaled my tree, how I approached it, but a few things I want to talk about before I end off the video is going to be 3 things. Firstly, how to achieve 90% maximum resist. For a perfect melding of the flash on the maximum res roll is -4%, which means that brings your resist to 71%. And to hit 90% resistances, that is where you'll need to get 19% max res. So that's where we start off with the flask, where we have 95% increased flask effect. It is a pain to get the additional 5% more flask effect, but essentially we have 95%, so this gives us 9 maximum resist, so that leaves us with 10% left to achieve on our build. And that is where we go to Purity of Lightning. So I realized this league, that Eternal Blessing alone, 2120 gives 25% aura effect. And why is this so important? It's because Purity of Lightning, level 20 or 21, gives 4% additional max res. And what is 25% of 4%? That's 5%. Quick math. So essentially, you get 5% max res from Purity of Lightning with Eternal Blessing, which you're using anyway, which is insane. So we didn't need to solve it anywhere else. So that's 5% left that we need to get. And that is where this league introduced rare jewels, now having up to 2% max res rolls, which so easily solved our problems. We no longer needed to get +2 SOK the AoE gems on our gloves to be able to get an additional 1% max res, things like that. So be able to get the 2% here, which leaves us with 3% left to get. And in a very efficient pathing, we're able to get a jewel socket, cannot be stunned, and 3% max res through these nodes. And on top of that, this makes it very efficient. Before you get a corrupted implicit jewel with a corrupted blood immunity, you can just take 1 passive point and you are corrupted blood immune, which means you can drop the life flask for either a Progenesis or a Bottle Faith. So that is how we achieved a 90% max res on our gear to achieve 90% melding, which gives us mitigation. And what makes it so nice on top of that is that 50% of the physical damage you are taken is then taken as lightning, which is mitigated by 90%, which is held by melding. So essentially there's something like 45% reduced physical damage taken by just putting on lightning call and not even bothering to scale any form of armor or physical defense. So the only thing we have is a Fistmit and our effective HP pool. And of course, even though this might not be the most demonstrable metric that would result in you relying on these numbers to identify how strong your build is, but to some extent it does show how tanky your build is with the raw amount of max hit that you can take across the different damage types. The second one I want to talk about is dealing with mana cost. So this league, I think they solved the mana cost issue here. Let me remove this. It is still a bit inaccurate. It shows that I have 196 mana cost, I have 156. So POB is still not the most accurate, I think, on this. So anyways, to solve mana cost for this build, this league has the nerf to inspiration, which then removed the additive nature to a multiplicative, so that kind of increased our mana cost this league. So the ways to solve the mana cost, there are a few ways, which I talked about earlier. The Militant Faith with the mana cost reduction that I don't think most people are using. So I think this is very important to bring the mana cost down, which then makes sure that you have more mana for your effective HP pool. Apart from that, the passive tree allows you to take Dreamer, the Dreamer cluster, you get 15% here. The Righteous Decree, you get additional 3% here. And the Mastery for the mana cost will reduce your mana cost further. Apart from that, jewellery is going to be a very prime place if you want to get, if you have very good suffixes on your jewellery and you don't have a mana roll. That's where you can craft on mana and mana cost reduction on your jewellery, and that could be very strong. I might look for a rare amulet option in the future, so maybe a Zopex roll or a percentage mana cost reduction to reduce my mana cost further in the future. One thing I also want to talk about is the gear that you could get. I think there's a few pieces of the gear like Singularity, reducing mana cost. Yes, Singularity is a very good early game option to get your damage and reduce mana cost in 6 to 8%. If you want to offer that option. Profane 1 is very, very strong though, so not something I recommend, but there's an option out there. And lastly is your mana pool. So most people have the misconception that more mana equals better, and you're not wrong. It's just that having more mana is an opportunity cost, and having more mana past a certain point has a diminishing return because it no longer provides defense, because once your HP hits 0, no matter how much mana you have remaining, that's useless. So typically I don't scale past 8,000 mana, at least for this stage of the build, and currently I have 7,400 and I'm comfortable with 8,000 mana, or somewhere plus minus 500 mana. So that is the point which I'm scaling at, and there's more efficient ways to scale your damage after that. There's going to be via crit multi, there's going to be cast speed, it's going to be all the more multipliers that you could get via power charges, for example. So there's more efficient ways to scale your mana, even though of course you say, oh, Archmage, you get more flat lightning and so on, but that no longer provides defense. And people don't realize, but it also provides a downside to your build, which is increased mana cost, because Archmage is a percentage of your unreserved maximum mana. So the more mana you have, the more mana it costs, and the more cost every cast is going to take. So that is actually a downside that people don't realize. More mana is not actually a pure win. More mana could actually be detrimental via the mana cost of the build. Lastly was an interesting take, which was scaling the power charges. Over here I took Kitava's Thirst with a power charge here and a Militant Faith. Combining that, it makes it a very efficient pathing. You can see here is on the way to get the leech, the insta leech here. And power charges give a lot of damage via the Inner Conviction. And to be able to get past the 4 minimum power charges that we have on our Ascendancy, since we're taking 2 more maximum power charges, is the DD special, and that is via a quality from Assassin's Mark, where every enemy you hit has a chance to give you a power charge, which gives you maximum power charges instantly, essentially. And this also goes through hexproof maps, which is really nice because they're only hexproof but not mark proof. So yeah, essentially this will give you the 6 power charges with 100% uptime for the build, which I thought was a very interesting construction, using the Militant Faith, mana cost reduction, power charges, and how I built melding, amplifying into the Lightning Coil Physics conversion, and getting that 90% max res. So that's what I wanted to share for the build. So yeah, do let me know if you have any questions. I'll be streaming the next few days, so do pop by if you see me on stream. Ask me any questions there or drop them in the comments below. If you like the video, do feel free to like, share, or subscribe. And yeah, I think that's it for my video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.